Good morning, everyone, or actually, good afternoon for some, and really early good morning for others. How's everybody doing? We're just about to start our webinar. I just want to see people entering the waiting room. I see several people, so let's go ahead and get started this morning. Welcome everyone to Foreign Investing in the USA, Real Estate Opportunities and the Legal Aspects of this. It's hosted by FIOPSI USA and the Commercial Committee. My name is Ritu Rani, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Commercial Committee. And I'm here today with Dan Lazar, who's also on the Commercial Committee, and a very special guest speaker, Anda Malescu, and I'll be introducing Anda in a second. I just want to do some quick housekeeping items. First, we've got our installation coming up for our new president of FIOPSI USA, Carla Raymond Kidd, and that's on May 6th in DC. So if you haven't registered already, I hope that you will, and I hope to see you all there. After that, the Miami Association of Realtors is hosting the 73rd, is it? Allison just confirmed the
It is
73rd
correct.
FIOPSI World Congress here in Miami, and that is June 5th through the 9th. So I'm hoping that even more of you will come to that, and we'll get a chance to meet down here in our hometown. That's where Dan and I are located, and Anda is as well. So you know, we're really excited to do this presentation today. Dan and I do a lot of business with the international community, as all of you do as well. That's why we're members of FIOPSI, and the Commercial Committee thought it would be a great idea to have an expert come in and talk a little bit more about all of the legal aspects involving foreign transactions and how to set them up, and just to make it easier to give you all more knowledge on how these transactions can run a little more smoothly. So I'm going to introduce Anda, and then I'm going to have Dan speak a little bit about the market conditions here so that it puts the presentation in a little more context. So Anda Malescu is the managing partner of Malescu Law, and this is a Miami law firm that specializes in business and corporate immigration. She advises U.S. and international clients, investors, and entrepreneurs on matters related to business formation, corporate structures, company acquisitions and mergers, and business immigration, which is also a very, very important aspect of investing in the United States. She's been instrumental in bringing new investment and new jobs to South Florida and assisting her international clients set up their businesses here. So welcome, Anda. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and having me today.
Great. Well, we're really excited to hear everything that you have to say. As I said before, Dan is going to start with giving us a little bit of a market background, and then we'll jump right into your presentation. And if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll try and get to them either when Anda is speaking or at the end. Okay. So thanks very much. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you so much, Ritu. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much, Anda, for joining us. I know we worked in the past for a deal, commercial real estate deal, linked to immigration visa. So that's why I thought it's a great idea to give some help, useful information for everybody through this process. As we all know, 2022 and till late 2022 was an unprecedented year for commercial real estate, and there were many deals done with an incredible dynamic. However, right now we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown, but it looks like this will be short, and the commercial real estate investor will position themselves for a new growth cycle that's next to come. Of course, the rates for the investments were a little bit increased lately, so that affected the process. But the deals are still happening. It takes a little longer, but they're still getting done. And we still see a lot of foreign investors coming in the market. And some of the interesting points for them, it's although for us, the rates are increased, for them, they might be really advantageous. We've seen countries like Brazil and Argentina with very, very high inflation rates. So the US market is very attractive for them. We also see the instability in Ukraine and Russia situation creating supply chain problems, but creating also opportunities for clients from that market coming into the US because they see it as a stable, safe market. So that could drive some new business in the United States. Of course, the market it's different for different parts of the US, but we've seen, especially for the Sunbelt states, Florida, Texas, Arizona, we've seen an increased flow of immigration. And obviously, there are some opportunities in commercial real estate, especially for asset class like multifamily. We see for industrial new developments. We all have to keep in mind, there's still a risk related to the capital markets, but we've seen new opportunities, and we'll have some information for everybody to show how a foreign investor can enter the market and what's the proper way to do so by acquiring a business or investing in commercial properties. Anda?
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you, Dan, for inviting me, and thank you, Ritu, for having me as well here. My name is Anda Malescu. I'm the owner of Malescu Law. We're located in downtown Miami, and I specialize in business corporate law in the state of Florida and business immigration and investment immigration throughout the United States. However, because the practice is in South Florida, most of our work is concentrated to South Florida, but we also represent investors elsewhere in the United States. Now, I'm going to give you, if you will, a crash course on investor visas or how to enter the US market. A lot of what I'm going to say, it may sound easier than it is in practice, but it should give you the foundation to assist your clients, or at least direct your clients to explore these options if they have an interest in real estate, and also discuss how the commercial real estate and also residential real estate plays a part in obtaining these visas as well. So I'm going to share with you the presentation. Okay, and then I'm going to reduce this web. Okay. So we're going to discuss three main investment-related visas and business-related visas. However, I do want you to know that there are other types that can be used on a case-by-case basis combined with investment in real estate. But this is the foundation of an investor or an entrepreneur coming to the United States. And we have an L1 visa, an E2 investor visa, and an EB5 visa. The EB5 visa is a green card that is permanent residency for the United States, while the L1 visa and the E2 visa, these are temporary visas for the United States. So they are not permanent residency visas. And they don't directly lead, but an investor can apply from an L1 or an E2 visa, can take the EB5 route later on, or can take another route to a green card later on. And the L1 visa and the E2 visa, they are the faster visas, if you will, to enter the United States before pursuing permanent residency. So what they all three have in common, the E2 visa, the L1 visa, and the EB5, is the investment component of it. And we are going to discuss each and one of them. So how does real estate come into play with these visas? Well, investors need a place to work in the United States. So sometimes they come and they will need warehouse space, or they would want to open or purchase a donut shop and they need a location in a plaza, or they want to do a restaurant, or they want to do some form of a hotel and they need to purchase a building, or they need to do some office related office space that they are looking for. And instead of leasing, some of the investors would also want to purchase. Because as you'll see later, purchasing the real estate and the money that is being spent on purchasing the commercial property as opposed to leasing is considered investment for the investor visa purposes. And then once the investor and their family is in the United States, they will need a place to live as well. So they will be looking into purchasing residential real estate as well. And some investors, and this is very popular in South Florida, may want to purchase residential real estate to lease it as vacation rentals, or to set up some form of a property management company offering services to some of their own properties among the portfolio of other residential real estate that they own. And now we are going to speak about the L1 visa. So L1 visa, as I said, is a temporary visa for the United States. It is not permanent residence. It is not a green card in the United States. And it's typically available for those investors or entrepreneurs who already own a business in their home countries. Usually the business needs to be in existence for at least 1 year, because one of the requirements for the L1 visa is that the individual who is applying for this visa is looking to expand the company in the United States, but also they must have been employed for at least 1 year with the foreign company, right, with their company in their home country, or whichever other country it's not related to the place of citizenship. L1 visa is not tied to citizenship, but it's rather tied to having a business abroad and expanding that business to the United States. And the person needs to have worked with the foreign company for at least 1 year in an executive, manager, or specialized knowledge employee. The L1 visa can also be used by companies to bring employees from their foreign offices. So not only for the business owner, who is the executive and the manager of the foreign company, but also for companies that want to bring other type of employees, such as specialized knowledge employees, to the United States. And again, it's not tied to citizenship. The L1 visa can be used to form a new company in the United States. It's called an L1 new office, and it can also be used for existing companies. And existing companies are defined as companies that have been doing business in the United States for at least 1 year. So you can get a visa to set up a company as a new office, or if your company has been doing business in the United States for more than at least 1 year, then you can also use the L1 visa to bring an executive manager or specialized knowledge employee to the United States. And the difference between the two, there's some legal requirements that differ between the two, but the most important part with the new company and existing company is that for a new company, the initial visa is granted for 1 year, while for an existing company, the visa will be granted initially for 3 years, and then you can renew it. The L1 visa allows the person to travel in and out of the United States. Also, the person can bring their children, their family to the United States, their spouse and children. L1 is a dual intent visa, so while they are in the United States, they can pursue a green card simultaneously, and that will not conflict with the L1 visa intent, meaning that they will be able to travel in and out, travel internationally without any issues, and adjust status or do a consular processing. So we are going to look at the requirements for the L1. The foreign company and the US company need to have a qualifying relationship. So either you have the foreign company is the parent of the US company, or the US company is the parent company and the foreign company is a subsidiary, or the foreign company and the US company are affiliates of each other, meaning that they are owned by the same individuals in similar percentages, or the US company is a branch of the foreign company. As I said, the person who is coming to the United States on an L1 visa needs to have been employed for at least 1 year in the past 3 years prior to application by the company abroad in an executive manager or specialized knowledge employee position. And the requirement for L1 visa, and here is the real estate part of it, one of the legal requirements is that the US company has secured physical office for its employees. This is a requirement for the L1 visa, and the investor or the person who's coming to the United States needs to comply with it in order to even qualify for the L1 visa. They need to either purchase the commercial premises or they need to lease the commercial premises, but they need to have commercial premises available for their employees in order for them to qualify for the L1 visa. And United States Citizenship and Immigration Services is quite strict on this requirement. Okay. And the US office, another requirement that the US office will support the executive or managerial position within 1 year of approval. This means that the company will be growing sufficiently to justify why the person should be in the United States and continue to be in the United States as an executive or manager. The length of stay, as I said before, 1 year for new office initially, and then it can be renewed. It can be renewed up to 7 years for executives or managers. And if it's an existing office, so a US company that has been doing business in the United States for at least 1 year, then the L1 is approved for initially 3 years, and then it can be renewed for up to 7 years. It is eligible for, it's a dual intent visa, so it's eligible for permanent residency. A natural step from an L1 would be an EB1C, but again, from L1, the investor or the executive could also go a different route with various type of permanent residency avenues and obtain a green card, not just through the EB1C, but it can also be an EB5, if you will. And now we're going to speak about the E2 treaty investor visa. This is probably the most popular visa. Is a non-immigrant visa. That means it's temporary. It's not a green card. It's not permanent residency in the United States. It requires a lower investment. Typically, the investment is around $100,000. Now, we've been approved with cases for less than $100,000, but in generally, the threshold, I would recommend that the investor looks at least $100,000 in investment in the United States in order to have the visa approved without any type of incidents or denials, and be asked to invest more money and these sort of situations. Now, one of the, if you will, the limitations with the E2 investor visa is that it's based on citizenship. So there are about 80 countries that have an E2 treaty investor, an E2 treaty with the United States. So not every citizen of every country in the world will qualify for the E2 visa. There are about 80 countries that have an E2 treaty. Our neighboring countries, Mexico and Canada, have an E2 treaty. Then there are many European countries that have an E2 treaty, such as Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, Italy, the Eastern European countries, Romania, Bulgaria, have an E2 treaty as well. Some of Asian countries have an E2 treaty, such as Japan has an E2 treaty, South Korea has an E2 treaty, Thailand has an E2 treaty, and there are some other countries, Turkey, and Israel has an E2 treaty. In Africa, probably the largest country that has an E2, it would be like Morocco and Egypt. And then for South America, you will have, and the Caribbean, some of the countries that have an E2 treaty would be like Argentina, Chile, Grenada, Costa Rica, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. And these are some of the countries. Now, the Department of State publishes a treaty, an E2 treaty country list, and I can share the link with you, and you can always check if the person has a treaty, then they may be able to apply for the E2 visa. The latest country that has been approved for an E2 treaty investor visa is actually Portugal. And this was done, the act was signed December 2022, so not that long time ago, but Portugal has not yet been added to the E2 treaty country list. So Portuguese individuals at this moment cannot apply for E2 visa, but the act has been signed into law. So we expect to see Portugal this year on the E2 treaty country list, and then have the Portuguese, the US consulate in Portugal start processing E2 investor visas as well. So as I said, first for E2 visa, you need a passport from one of the treaty countries. Then the investor needs to invest at least $100,000 in a US commercial enterprise. This means that the person can start a business from zero, or they can purchase a business. So, for example, they can do an E2 investor visa by starting a donut shop in, let's say, in Fort Lauderdale. And part of the deal could be purchasing the real estate of where the donut shop will be located, right? Like the donut shop, it's in the plaza, they purchase the real estate, and then they purchase equipment with the money for the investment. And then they set up all their advertisement and marketing and all all the inventory that they need to start running the business, and that's how how they can obtain an E2, and also that's how real estate plays into an E2. And the donut shop is just an example, but it can be any other type of business. It can also be a restaurant, or it can be a marketing agency. Any type of business can invest in a commercial real estate as part of their investment for the E2 business, and actually purchase the commercial real estate. And they could also finance the commercial real estate in the process, but it can be part of an E2 investor visa. With the E2, the benefits are that the investor and the family can come to the United States and travel in and out of the United States. It can be renewed indefinitely as long as the business is doing well and it's hiring US workers. The spouse of the E2 has an unrestricted right to work in the United States, and at this moment they don't need to apply for work permits. It used to be that spouses had to apply for work permits in order to be able to work. Now that requirement has been lifted. So the spouse is considered authorized to work incidental status, and the spouse of an E2 investor can decide to start their own business, can work for the E2 business, can work for any other company, US company, or a foreign company, and they can also be sponsored for a green card. So the spouse of an E2 could work also to be sponsored for a green card later down the road. So these are just the requirements for the E2 that we discussed. National of a treaty country, investment must be substantial. You are looking at around 100,000. At least the investor needs to be managing and developing the enterprise in the United States. So they cannot be a passive investor where they are just contributing the capital, but then somebody else runs the show for them. That would not qualify for an E2 visa. So the investor needs to directly be involved in the management of the company. And then the foreign national needs to own the enterprise. Typically, at least 50% of the US business needs to be owned by the investor, the treaty investor, or possesses some operational control. Here is a little bit about the substantial amount. How do we determine the substantial amount of the investment in the United States? The law does not have an actual threshold that's written into the law, but it speaks of the word substantial, and substantial differs from business to business. Some businesses require a lot more capital than others, but basically they are looking at the money that the investor is putting into the business versus the total cost to start that business. That is in the case where the investor is starting the business from zero. So it's coming to the United States, forming the US legal entity, and is starting the business from zero. It's their own business. Then they will look at how much money the investor is putting in and how much does it cost to start the business. Certain businesses cost less than others, such as if you sell online. Let's say you sell games online. Selling games online or keys to some games is not going to require the same amount of capital that a restaurant would require. And that's why sometimes you would have companies that can start and obtain an E2 investor visa with less capital than others. So there are businesses that can be started with $60,000 because that is the total startup cost for that specific business. And it's typical for businesses that are channeled on selling online, usually. The rest tend to be more capital intensive. In the case of purchasing a business, the substantial amount is the purchase price of that business. So whatever you are, if you're buying the donut shop again for $200,000, then that 200,000 would be your investment, and it would be substantial based on the purchase price. Additional requirements the government is looking for, obviously, is capital must be placed at risk. This is a legal requirement that the capital invested is at risk. This is sometimes hard for investors to understand, but they need to spend the money prior to applying for an E2 visa. They're buying the commercial property as part of their business venture, then they have to make the payment, or they can put it in an escrow. But with startup companies, they should be spending part of the money prior to applying for the visa in order to show that the capital is placed at risk. And what the government is referring to here is at the risk of being lost if the E2 visa is not approved. So the investor needs to understand and accept to take the risk and invest in a business with the risk that the E2 visa may not be approved. The investor must also show where the funds are coming from. Obviously, source of funds. The investor will need to show where do they have the capital to invest, and that is not obtained through criminal activity, and that the U.S. business is not going to be marginal. And marginal for a startup can be proven by business plan, but basically, in order not to be marginal, a business needs to be able to hire employees, U.S. workers. So it cannot be that the business will be making sufficient money just for the investor and their family members. The business needs to make enough money to be able to hire people. And that's based on a projection for startups initially, but after that, on renewal, a consular officer will look at what the business has achieved and decide whether the company is marginal or not. But it has to have the ability to hire people. And this can be challenging at times when you have investors who want to purchase real estate, residential real estate, and rent it out. Sometimes 5, okay, this is a case that's actually was denied. It hasn't been our case, but the colleague of mine. For example, purchasing 5 residential real estate properties and renting them out was not deemed to be sufficient to employ people, was actually considered a marginal business, despite the investor spending $800,000 on those properties. And the E2 was actually denied, I believe, at the Colombian Post. So keep in mind, the government looks for this marginality, and they generally, for E2 visas, they don't really like business models that focus primarily on real estate in the sense of purchasing 5 residential properties and renting them out. I'm not saying it cannot be done. It could be done, but it would require a lot more properties to be acquired and a lot more capital to be invested, if that is the business model. Typically, investor visas are granted for up to 5 years, depending on the treaty country. So this is treaty by treaty, country by country, case by case basis. Canada has a 5-year treaty, for example, with the United States. It's typically 2 to 5 years. There are countries with less time under the treaty. For example, Poland has 1 year under the E2 treaty, so the maximum an investor can obtain is 1 year. However, every time the investor comes in on an E2 visa, they get 2-year status. So technically, even if the visa is valid on its face for 5 years, the investor can get 2 years if they enter right before the expiration of their visa. They can get an additional 2 years of status. There are no limits to extension as to how many times you can renew the E2 visa. An E2 visa is quite, it's a fast route to start a business or purchase a business and come to the United States. Typically would take the investor anywhere from 3 to 6 months to set up and do all the setup, and then the time to obtain an interview at their specific posts. And some posts are slower than others. The investor can also have their children in school. They can travel in and out. And that is it for the E2 visa. And now we have the EB-5 investor visa. This is a green card. And it has been, there's a new act that was signed last year, the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, that changed also the investment requirements and also made some other changes to the EB-5 investor visa. The purpose is to stimulate the US economy, bring foreign direct investment to the United States, and create jobs in the United States. Again, investors and entrepreneurs are eligible for this type of green card. There are 2 types of EB-5s. There's a direct EB-5, and then there's the regional center. Direct EB-5 is basically the investor starting a business in the United States with the required amount of capital, and the investor is the person who will be directly, actively managing the business, cannot be in a passive investor where somebody else runs the show for him. So with the direct EB-5, it is the investor who invests their personal money, their capital, and they run the business, and they create the business and hire full-time 10 full-time employees. Over time, it's not 10 full-time employees at moment 0, but it's over time. And also an E2 investor visa that has been a startup can become an EB-5 if the investment has been made. And then we have the regional center. Regional centers are actually developed by other teams of professionals, and with the EB-5 regional centers, the investor will only contribute the capital, but the investor is not required, can be passive, is not required to participate in the management of the company. So it's basically only contributing the capital to the business project. Now, the investment requirement. Under the new Act of 2022, the minimum investment is $800,000 for businesses in rural or high unemployment areas, and $1,050,000 for businesses that are located in urban areas or low unemployment areas. The high unemployment and low unemployment areas is determined by USCIS, but the investor needs to show why should they, if they apply with the 800,000 with the lower amount, they'll need to prove to United States Citizenship and Immigration Services why are they entitled to qualify for the EB-5 with a lower amount. And this can be done with economists, and there are certain rules surrounding the definition and how exactly what business qualifies as high unemployment or what area qualifies as high unemployment and rural area. And this can be done with an economist. The job creation requirement is that the investment leads to the creation of 10 full-time jobs, and that excludes the investor and their family members. The 10 full-time jobs, as I said, if it's a startup, if it's a company that the investor is owning and managing it directly, and they are putting the capital into their own business, they do not need to have the 10 full-time employees at the time of application. They need to have the capital available at the time of application, so 800,000 or $1,050,000 available. And then the full-time jobs can be created over after the petition is approved within 2 years of obtaining conditional residency. With EB-5, the investor, if the petition is approved, the investor obtains conditional green card for 2 years, and then they'll need to show the government that they have hired the 10 full-time employees within the 2 years after receiving conditional green card, and then lift those conditions and become a permanent green card. So the 10 full-time employees are not, the investor is not required to have them at the time of application. This, as I said, this is a permanent residency to the United States. With the regional center, with an EB-5 regional center, the investor can be a passive investor and not participate in the management of a company. For example, a regional center would be the investor's money is pooled with other investors' money. So let's say you have 10 individuals who are interested in an EB-5 regional center. They all contribute $800,000. Each one of them contributes $800,000, and then you will have a regional center that's approved to administer the process, and then you'll have another company that's developing a project. Let's say they are doing assisted living facility in Florida, so they're going to develop an assisted living facility, and part of that deal could be also building or acquiring real estate as part of what their project is going to do, and the investors are only putting the money, and then the team of developers will develop the project and be administered by a regional center to obviously return the capital to the investor at the end, once the conditions are removed on the green card. And that is the EB-5 regional center. An EB-5 direct investment could be, let's say, opening a supermarket, a larger supermarket in an area that is specialized. And part of it would be purchasing the property, the commercial real estate for that supermarket where it will be operating, and then investing part in the commercial, part in the inventory, and whatever else is needed to run and market and hire the individuals for that specific supermarket. And that is it. Thank you so much for everything. We reached the end of my presentation, and I hope this was very useful for you.
Anda, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, and I think you've taught us all something. We did have one question come in, and I also have a question for you. So, with the E2 visas that you were talking about, how much success have you had with your clients getting those visas? Because you mentioned there was one client that they bought 5 properties and they still got rejected. So what do you think the magic number is to get accepted, and have you had success with that specific visa?
Well, we do E2s, but generally our E2s investors are focused on other business models than purchasing residential real estate for renting. We do like imports, all sorts of online businesses, donut shops that I gave as an example, marketing agencies. So we do a variety, but I'll say this, the consular officers do not like E2 businesses where the model is based strictly on real estate. So for example, if you have an E2 business that says, okay, I'm going to buy this property and I'm going to transform it into a hotel, that's absolutely acceptable for an E2, okay? Because you need you're going to purchase the real estate and then you are going to modify the rooms and make all these changes and you're going to make this investment and people are going to rent rooms in your hotel and you're going to generate revenue and you can buy another property afterwards and so on and so forth. But it has the potential to employ US workers, right? Because you need people to work for you in a hotel, right? But the problem when you're only doing real estate in the sense of I'm buying these residentials and I'm renting them out, it doesn't really have a much potential for growth, if you will, at least not in the eyes of the consular officer. So they're scrutinizing these cases a lot. I would say, and especially I believe in Latin America, they're even more scrutinized than in other places. This was not my case, but this is not the first case I hear that has been denied in Latin America over this issue. So I've heard another case, the similar situation where a couple of properties were purchased. The opportunity, and in that case, the individual even I guess set up an administrative office trying to prove to the government and hired people, and they still wouldn't have it. And they wrote a very lengthy, the consular officer wrote a very lengthy opinion as to why they don't believe that is an operating business. They view it as more passive because it doesn't have opportunities. At least in the eyes of the consular officer, the opportunity for growth is limited. Now, if we're talking about 15, this needs to be a bit balanced, because it's hard for me to say, and I don't want your audience now, but because if I say 20, now everybody is going to think, oh my God, I go buy 20 properties and here's the magic number and I'm going to pay. So I absolutely, I can say this on, but it's a balance in looking what the revenues that will generate and where the money will be reinvested in, and how many people it takes to run those properties. Because the more properties you have, obviously, the more people you'll need to run them, right? Because you'll need to manage them. You'll need a property management firm. In my opinion, doing a property management firm where possibly you could manage some of your properties that you have, but you offer services to other people, that would be a suitable E2 business, as opposed to going just with the model where you're renting out real estate.
So you think it has to do more with, I guess, the total dollar volume and the number of jobs that will help you more than the number of properties?
Well, the thing is that it has a limit, with the number of properties. Every property there are that many days in a calendar year, okay? That's kind of what the issue is. So you can rent it for as much. It has a finite time and space, if you will. You cannot rent, what can you possibly do? You can increase the amount of money you ask for, but you cannot extend the numbers in the year to generate more revenue, right? While let's say a restaurant can get more and more and more and more and more clients and open a second location and another location and another location. It has this potential for growth. The only way you can grow with the real estate is acquiring new properties. So
that's what
I think here the balance is initially to have enough properties to show and I'm saying possibly. So again, I don't want your audience to think that this is a guaranteed that if they do this would be successful. The more properties you have, it will possibly be able to show more revenue that you will be generating, and why you will need to hire. Your revenue will justify why you need all these people on your payroll, because the government and the consular officers are also going to be looking, are you boosting your employee without a need for it? Your business is not generating enough money, but you're trying to meet the legal requirements. So now you're putting people on payroll, but you don't need that.
Yes, makes sense. I'm going to ask the audience question before I ask my question. Teresa was asking if the employees can work in any state. And Teresa, I'm assuming this is because, like, are you talking about the state that they're purchasing the property in? That can they work in another state or?
No, I was asking, I'm sorry if you can hear
Yeah,
me.
go
I
ahead,
was
please.
asking if the attorney in that firm can work in any state on our behalf.
Oh, if
Wait, I'm not-
Anda can represent your clients in
Right,
any
because they're
state.
in Miami, so are they
Right.
able to work in any state?
Yes, can I practice and represent clients that are in any other state in the United? Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I have
Okay,
a
so-
question, and this is
Sure.
regarding to a client currently, that has EB5 projects that failed because of possibly some fraudulent activities. And I understand that happens, okay? And I don't know how frequently, but maybe you can speak to that. But the builder, okay, got control of the property because he was able to sue for the losses that he had on it. So now he's a new owner of these properties. Could he qualify? Could these properties qualify for EB5 money again, or any other level of foreign investors?
This would require more analysis than just on this. I can't speak to this. It would require more analysis.
Anda, can you do me a favor? Would you mind putting your contact info in the chat and saying it out loud also for people so they can reach out to you after this and follow up with their specific questions, or if they have clients that maybe you can start working with, that would be really helpful.
Yes.
While she's doing that, I want to make another for those of you who joined late. Just repeat that May 6th is the FIOPSI USA installation in DC, and then May 5th through 9th is the 73rd International World Congress here in Miami. So if you haven't registered, you can register. All the information is on the FIOPSI USA website. So please go ahead and do that. And then Anda, I'm going to ask you my question once you're done. I don't want to give you too many things to do at once.
Okay, I hope
Okay.
everyone can see it in the chat. We have the email, the phone number, the website. If
Can everyone see it? I don't see it.
you don't see it, need to check. Let me see. It's not in the chat.
Dan, do you have Anda's information? Do you mind putting it in the chat for everybody?
Oh, I checked. Okay, sorry, everyone. I think I just emailed. I just wrote it to somebody personally. I
Oh,
apologize.
no, it came up. It came up now. Okay, so Anda, I wanted to ask you two questions. The first is, as far as setting up these companies, I know your practice helps a lot with setting them up. What do you find is, I mean, I guess every situation is probably differently, but do most of these investors, do they set up REITs, or do they like how do they set up their corporations before getting these visas? Because I'm sure it makes a difference.
The simple limited liability companies, depends how sophisticated the individual is, but it just corporations or limited liability companies. And I'm only speaking as to the state of Florida here, because there may be other legal entities that can be set up in other states. I'm only speaking as to the state of Florida. Generally, our clients go between
With LLC.
corporations and LLCs, yeah.
Okay, okay. And the other question that I was gonna ask you, which Dan also just put in the chat, but Dan, you can ask as well. Just how long does the process take for these different types of visas?
Oh, they're very different from each other. So with the with the let's say with the E2, because the most popular one and probably the fastest one and the least regulatory, if you will, because the client can apply directly with the consulate, so they don't have to go through the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services first and obtain an approval. Typically, it takes. I have found in my practice that it takes the clients about 2 to 6 months to follow the instructions, okay? To follow the instructions that we give them into what are the steps that they need to take. Now, I have to say that two months it's a very short amount of time to deliver all the work that's required for an E2, for the investor to take the steps and make the investment and get the property and the licenses and purchase their equipment and all of that. It has happened to only one client, and that's because the client was very eager and worked basically 24 out of 24 to get it done in 2 months. But usually what I have found that 6 months would be enough time where the person can take care of their personal life in their home country and focus on the business. So, if you will, in a more at a more flexible and comfortable pace would be 6 months for the investor to focus on the business, and then the time it takes to get an interview at the U.S. consulate abroad where they are located. We as a firm, to prepare the materials, we take 3 weeks at the max to prepare the materials. So it's the investment side does take some time from finding the location and all of these. And now U.S. consulates, they vary. Smaller consulates take less time. Some of my clients come from Romania, and that's a small post that processes gives interviews within a month, for example. They're quite prompt about, but they're larger, like Toronto. Toronto, usually you can expect 4 to 6 months to obtain an interview easily.
This is for the E2 visas.
That's for the E2 visas. With the L1 visa, it is different. The L1 visa is first processed by United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and only after it is approved by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, then the person can get an appointment at the U.S. consulate and obtain a visa. Now, at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they can pay an additional fee of $2,500, and they can have the visa process, the application processed within 15 calendar days.
Okay.
Otherwise, the regular processing depends on the specific time of the year, but anywhere from 6 to 10 months at this time, I believe. And after it is approved, then it will be transferred to the consulate, and then the person will need to make an appointment and wait for an interview date to be available at their specific post. So with the L1 visa, there's this additional step that's in between. You have the consulate, but you also have,
So a follow-up question to that is, so you've got all the paperwork, you got the approvals, and now it's time to transfer the money. What are the issues around international money transfers in terms of exchange or getting it into this company or into this country from other banks? Tell us a little bit about how that works.
So first of all, they need to bring the money before the application is even submitted. And it doesn't matter if it's an L1 visa or an E2 visa, because these are the temporary ones we're talking about. So they need to transfer the money in the company, let's say in an LLC, before, and start spending the money from the LLC's bank account before we even go to a U.S. consulate or the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. So money is being transferred internationally and spent ahead of time. And it needs to be for E2, it needs to be their personal money, the investor in general. But again, depends on certain situation who the owner is. and issues that are involved in it. Well, one of the challenges that we've noticed recently, especially recently, is opening a business bank account in the United States. Some banks have started to be, actually I was surprised, but I'm gonna tell you, actually it happened yesterday. Bank of America has given us a paper there that says that the person needs to be a US resident.
Wow.
I mean, I was in shock. I've noticed from clients recently complaining about it, and I went to ask, and I was provided with a list of requirements that speaks about a U.S. driver's license, a U.S. passport, a U.S. state ID, a passport, a foreign passport with a visa, but not B1, B2. Typically, ESTAs and B1, B2s are used by investors to come here to start opening the bank account, signing contracts. So this is one of the challenges we've seen recently, that the major US banks are creating a bit of a problem with opening a bank account, but there are smaller banks that can. And other than that, with the international transfer of money, generally hasn't been a problem. I guess it will depend on what country are we really talking about and what are those limitations in that specific country. Like I know Trinidad and Tobago has some limitations on how you transfer money abroad, but the investor would be more familiar with the requirements in their specific country. Otherwise, it would be a wire transfer and shouldn't be. What we found, at least with the European clients, the banks have not created a problem with respect to transferring large sums of money.
So is China the only country that has limits, okay, on their citizens for how much money they can transfer? And has that policy still exist, and at what amount for China?
China is not like our biggest market, so I wouldn't particularly know what
Okay,
what
well,
the restrictions with China are.
Anda, I just, we're out of time, so Bill, if you want to reach out to Anda separately, I know you guys have a lot of questions, but Bill's on our commercial committee as well. So thanks so much for joining. But Anda, it was great to have you. This was a lot of information. Would you be willing to share your slide deck with the group that attended?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you again for having me. I hope this is useful for you. I'm sure we cannot cover all the questions. And some, as you understand, I'm a licensed attorney. I cannot provide the legal advice or be interpreted as like legal advice for everyone, because it's not every case is different. I believe then I shared with you the presentation. I don't know if you want to share it with the group, but I can send it to Ritu or Dan again if you need, and then you can share it with the group.
That's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to take your permission to share it with everybody. So we'll have Biopsy USA email it to everyone that registered.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, no problem.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
Bye. Bye.